Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dome at Home. My name is Scott Young. I'm the planetarium astronomer at the Manitoba Museum. I'll be your host for the next half hour or so of astronomy content. Happy Earth Day. It is, in fact, the day that we celebrate our own planet and look forward to the sustainable development and sustainable existence here on our tiny little world that flies through space. We've got some Earth Day content for you today. We also have some fast breaking news regarding potential Northern Lights sightings. We've got an update from the planet Mars. George the cat may drop by a little bit later on. So we've got a full show. Riding the chat windows back at Mission Control, as always, is Mike. Mike, how you doing today?
Well, I can't compete against George the cat, but I'm doing all right. Enjoying this lovely weather that Earth Day is brought for us.
Oh, yeah, it's been just fantastic today. Something like 20, 21 degrees, a little bit windy, but beautiful skies. Last night, the skies were clear all night. I did spend a little bit of time. I didn't bother setting up any of the fancy gear. I just sat out on the picnic table in the backyard and just sort of looked up and watched the stars. Saw a couple of little satellites, but it was pretty nice for sure. And hopefully we'll get some good clear skies coming up in the next little while. We will be handling questions and answers in the chat. As always, Mike will moderate those. And so if you have questions, you can dump into the chat here on the Zoom webinar. That's the stuff that I can see easily. And so I'll try and keep an eye on those as well. Mike will also be out there in Facebook land and on YouTube answering comments and things like that. We will be saving some questions for the end of the show. So if your question doesn't get answered right away, it's because we're saving it for the Q&A section at the end. Yeah, so that's where we're going to go. We've got a little bit of news that's been going on this week that we're going to start with. You may have heard that the Lyrid meteor shower is on. I've seen all sorts of stuff all over Facebook with pictures like this showing all these shooting stars showering down out of the sky, and people are excited and they want to go out and see these things, and nobody's seeing anything. Well, I have to say, meteor showers can be overhyped. We often hear, you think the very word meteor shower, there must be a shower of these stars. Well, unfortunately, shower is a relative term. So meteors or falling stars, shooting stars, they're all different names for the same thing. The official name is meteor. They're tiny little pieces of dust and rock, the size of a grain of sand, a crystal of salt, something like that. And they're floating around out there in space. And as they float around in space, the Earth is also moving around the sun, moving through space, and it bumps into these little pieces of rock. So you've got giant planet Earth, tiny little piece of sand. It's pretty easy to figure out who wins that particular collision. The piece of sand has no chance. It goes down into the atmosphere, and it basically burns up in a flash of light. And we can see that flash of light all the way down here on the ground as a meteor. So basically what we're watching when we see a shooting star is a tiny, tiny little cousin of an asteroid from out there in space burning up in our atmosphere. You can see a shooting star roughly once every 10 minutes if you were out in a perfectly dark location where there's no city lights, the moon is not up, and so on. There's enough dust out there that every 10 minutes or so you would see one of these things come into the atmosphere. And that's every night of the year. So that's sort of the background rate. A shower is when there's more than that. In the case of the Lyrid meteor shower, you might see a meteor every 3 minutes instead of every 5 minutes, or every 10 minutes, pardon me. So 3 times as many. That's relatively a shower, I guess, but it's still only one shooting star every 3 minutes if it's perfectly dark, and if the moon's out of the way, and if you're watching the sky constantly for that whole period of time. Most people don't see a lot of shooting stars every night. And even when you go out during a meteor shower, most people don't see them unless they're really, really active. That's why we didn't really cover this last week, because it's not the kind of thing that I generally tell people to go outside and watch unless it's a good shower. The The conditions were not perfect. The moon was up in the evening and the shower peaked around 4 in the morning this morning. And I wasn't going to be the guy to tell you to get up at 4 in the morning this morning and then go outside and see 1 or 2 shooting stars. I wasn't going to be that guy. So the problem, of course, is these are averages. You can always have a shower that's better than usual or worse than usual. You never really know what Mother Nature is going to dish out when you go out under the sky. And so I guess I shouldn't be quite so jaded, and I should encourage people to observe the sky as much as possible. I just felt that 4 in the morning was not the best time to try and encourage people to come out. So yeah, that was the Lyrid meteor shower. You'll still see some in the next couple of nights. These things don't happen just in a short period of time. They sort of rise up over a few nights. The activity rises and then they fade away. So you'll probably see a few Lyrid meteors if you're out tonight. But again, the peak is sort of in the early morning hours. So that's the Lyrid meteor shower. There's another meteor shower coming up at the beginning of May, the Eta Aquariid meteor shower. Same kind of thing, a few meteors. Don't really get excited about a meteor shower until August, when the Perseids, the sort of old faithful meteor shower of the year, comes out. And then there's a couple of good winter ones. We covered the Quadrantid meteor shower in January. We did an all-night stream of that, and we had the all-sky camera going and saw quite a few meteors there. So there's a few that are good for the year. This wasn't one of them. So don't feel bad if you are just hearing about it now and you missed out, because you really didn't miss out on too much. We also got some great news from the sun today. The sun burped. The sun, of course, it's our star, a giant nuclear reactor giving off heat and light and all sorts of stuff. And it spews out radiation and material. And today there was something called a coronal mass ejection. A mass ejection, it's basically stuff from the sun that sort of gets burped out. And that stuff travels through space. And when it hits the Earth, that's the kind of thing that can spark more active northern lights. So we actually, right now, are forecasting that around April 25th, plus or minus 1 day, we can have elevated northern lights activity. So that's something to watch for. It's kind of nice to know that we have that little bit of a forecast. It's not a sure thing. Nothing ever is with the northern lights, but it's a good planning thing for now. And as we get closer to that date, we'll start to know, we'll be able to refine the time a little bit more. So keep in touch on social media, and you'll see all of the things for that. So here we have Earth Day. The planet Earth, the most important planet in the solar system, at least for us, the most beautiful planet in the solar system in many ways. And I'm just going to send a little message here. There we go. The only planet that supports life that we know of so far in the solar system. And it's mostly because of that blue stuff and that white stuff. I mean, it's this blue jewel against the inky, velvety blackness of space. How many ways did we learn to say blackness of space, Mike, running planetarium shows?
Yeah, that was definitely, we definitely had to look our thesaurus up for all the different ways to say it.
Yeah, it became a running joke. It's like, how many adjectives can you throw in there about how black space is? But it really is a very stark compared to this beautiful image of the Earth. And this is a picture from the Japanese Kagoya spacecraft. It was in orbit around the moon, and it was the first spacecraft in history to take a high-def video camera into space. And they literally didn't do it for any scientific reasons. They literally did it because they thought it would be cool to have video, high-def video from the moon. And they were right. They shot all these great videos of the Earth rising up. As the spacecraft would orbit around the moon, the Earth would rise up and give these very dramatic images and videos. The first Earthrise picture was taken back in 1968. This was from Apollo 8. The first spacecraft that went out to the moon had 3 astronauts on board, and they were going to go out there, orbit the moon, take a bunch of pictures of the moon, and get ready for future missions to land on the moon. No one ever thought to take pictures of the Earth. There was nothing in their mission that said, hey, look out the window and take a picture of your home planet. It's the first time anybody will have ever seen it like this. They didn't think of that. But as soon as they got there, they're looking out the window and they see the Earth rising, and the mission plan was out the window, and everybody grabbed cameras and loaded the color film and started taking pictures of the Earthrise. And it became one of the most famous images ever. This is one of the most published images in all of human history. And it's easy to see why. Like that, until that point, no one had ever seen the Earth like this. And when you look at it, you really see how thin the life-giving atmosphere is. You see that there's not much between us and that inky black velvety void of space that is completely hostile to life. So it really highlights the specialty of the planet. And then you know, as the Apollo missions went on, they started taking more and more pictures of the Earth. And from these pictures sort of became the banner that the green environmental sustainable movements sort of crystallized behind. When people started seeing these pictures and they started thinking about, you know, this is the only place we can live. There is no planet B, as they say. Oh, someone was just bringing me a cat, and the cat ran away. So we might not see George. We'll have to see how it goes. Anyway, the planet, there is no planet B, and Earth is just this wonderful planet to exist on. A lot of the things that we know about the Earth and that help us make these sustainable choices, or try and even just to learn about, you know, what we need to do for Earth Day, comes from the space program. Not just those first pictures, but most of the images that we have, all the scientific data about the oceans and ice and atmosphere and things like that, all come from satellites. We wouldn't have this global view if it weren't for the space program. Even just, you know, tracking the weather and figuring out what the weather is going to be like is all based on satellite systems now. And so the space program really led exactly to that. That's also why we study other planets. This is an image of one of the few spacecraft that survived on the planet Venus long enough to take a picture. This is from Venera 13. The first 12 didn't live long enough to actually take pictures. So Venus is a horrible, horrible place. It's got sulfuric acid in the atmosphere. The temperature is almost 500 degrees Celsius. The pressure is more than the pressure at the bottom of the ocean. So spacecraft, the robot spacecraft would just be squished or fried or dissolved, basically. It turns out that Venus is so hostile, not because it's closer to the sun. I mean, it is closer to the sun, so it's a little bit warmer, but that's not the difference between, you know, Earth here at, you know, 20 degrees Celsius today and Venus at 500 degrees. The difference on Venus is the atmosphere. There's a lot of carbon dioxide there. Carbon dioxide is what we call a greenhouse gas. The greenhouse gases that we're looking at are what we're worried about when it comes to climate change here on the Earth. Our understanding of greenhouse effect all came from the initial studies of the planet Venus. So when we study these other planets, we're actually not just studying other planets. We're studying planets in general because we live on one and we only have the one example. So astronomy has really sort of fed into Earth Day ever since the beginning. And even today, that's no difference from the way it was back in the early 70s. Oops, where's my... Oh, there's Ingenuity. We're going to come to Ingenuity in just a second. There. Wow. Not sure why it is not liking that. Okay, you know what? I'll skip that last image. Here's Ingenuity, the test flight of the helicopter drone. This is actually from the second flight. The first flight, they took a couple of quick pictures and they got a good sense of the that everything would work. The second flight, they went up and did a little bit of turning around, and yeah, this video is just, there we go. There's another view of the video. That's the view from the Perseverance rover. The helicopter works great. I can't wait until they start taking more pictures from the helicopter. They were mostly worrying about making sure that it was able to move around and so on. The next one, they're going to go up and steer around and things like that. Probably range a little bit farther than they have. So that'll be pretty exciting. And Emma actually has pointed out, yeah, Ingenuity did their test flight. They're up to 2 flights now, and we're really looking forward to see what happens next in terms of what Ingenuity can do. And again, Mars, there's another planet. Here's a planet, instead of having too much atmosphere, we have not enough. And that, well, we have a little visitor. Hi, Georgie. Yeah, he's not super happy, but that's kind of the way he is. George, look, say hi to all the people. Hi. He was very intrigued by the image of Ingenuity going up and down on the screen there, so that was distracting. Anyway, silly cat made me lose my space. So we learn a lot about our own planet by studying other ones. Usually every Earth Day, we all think about, well, what can we do to make things better, to do a little bit less damage to the Earth through our own actions. Some people will choose to bike or take public transportation instead of driving sometimes. Other people will change the things that they eat, or there's all sorts of ways that we can actually affect the climate by our own actions. Now, there are lots of other actions, of course. There's big companies that are doing things. There's industry. There's all these other things as well. And we can, of course, influence things by voting and, you know, all those sort of bigger kind of picture things. But we can also do local things. And there's one thing you can do that actually will help not only the Earth, but also the sky. Let's see if I can get that. No, that picture just doesn't want to stay. This is a picture of Winnipeg from the International Space Station. It's a nice clear day, and it's a picture at night, and look at all that light. Those are street lights and house lights and advertising lights. You can actually pick out all of the car dealerships in town because they don't use the yellowy lights. They use the white lights so that you can see the proper colors of the cars and things like that. Actually, it's gotten worse now because most of those yellow lights have now been replaced by the bright white LED lights. All of the light that you're seeing here is not light that is actually helping. This is light that, instead of going down onto the ground where it lights things up, it's going up into space. The way lights are designed, sometimes they're pointed up, and a lot of the light is actually completely wasted. And it either lights up the underside of birds and airplanes as they fly by, or it just goes right out into space where you can see it from space. This is called light pollution. And it's actually something that is very easy. It's kind of low-hanging fruit if you want to do something good for Earth Day. If you've got lights on in your house, wow, we're getting a lot of, there we go. If you've got lights on in your house or lights on in your yard or things like that, consider whether you need them on all the time. Do they have to stay on all night, or do you put them on a timer? If you have security lighting, well, do you need them on all the time, or do you want one of those motion sensor lights that just turns them on when somebody comes by? That's actually more effective from a safety point of view, and it saves a whole bunch of energy. All of that energy, all of that light has to be produced somehow. Here in Manitoba, it's mostly hydro, and that's relatively a clean, sustainable technology, although it still has its problems for sure. But in other places, they use coal, they use nuclear, they use, you know, all sorts of different ways to make all this energy. So reducing unnecessary light is a great way to save energy, and it has the nice effect that you have a better sky from your backyard. If you can convince your neighbor that maybe they don't need their all-night light on, you've got a better chance of seeing the northern lights from your backyard then, because that light's not in the way. So there's a whole connection here again between Earth Day and Astronomy Day. Astronomy Day comes up in May, and we'll talk more about that later. But the two really do sort of connect very well. All right. I'd love to talk more about light pollution, but we're going to save that for another day. I want to get on to some of the things that are happening in the sky so that you can get out there for tonight. Now, it is not full moon tonight, so don't let me mislead you here. But we are coming up to full moon. In about 5 days, it'll be full moon. And in about 2 days, you'll start hearing that this full moon is a supermoon. And the supermoon is super, and you should go out and see the supermoon. Well, you should absolutely go out and see the moon, but don't wait till the supermoon night. Go out every night and look at the moon. The moon is always super, no matter what the phase is. the difference of a supermoon being slightly closer and slightly bigger, it's almost not noticeable. In fact, I've gone out and I've taken pictures, and you can see the difference when you take the two pictures and put them beside each other. It's about a 10% difference in size. You don't notice that from night to night. You just can't see it visually. So a supermoon is going to look just like any other full moon, unless you're very, very careful. So I like to use the supermoon just as a reminder, oh yeah, I should go out and check out the moon. Full moon isn't the best time to look. The best time to look is actually before full moon, like tonight, because you're still going to have some of the moon is covered in shadow, and along the shadow, the area between night and day, that's where you get all sorts of shadows, and you can see the craters and the terrain there. So that's actually the best time to look at the moon, especially if you have a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, but even with the unaided eye, great to look at the moon for the next 4 or 5 days. And we've gone back to an image of Perseverance. When we were talking about our Mars lander and the Ingenuity helicopter, we've been doing Mars landing activities, and a bunch of people have sent in, their Mars lander with their egg pilots. And we got some great videos from some people, and we've selected a few of the folks to get a little prize package from the museum. So these folks here, Lander and Danica, Kaylee and her sister, Amy and Isabella, you're all going to be getting an email after the show to let you know how you can pick up your Dome at Home prize pack. So thank you very much for everybody that sent in those videos and those projects, all those Mars things. It was great to see people doing some of these activities and having fun with it. And that was the whole point of Dome at Home. So I'm glad to see that people were doing that. All right, let me go on to the sky here. This is the sky right now, and you'll notice that it's not dark enough to see any stars. It's too late in the season for the sky to be dark at this point of the year. We started this show in January, and the sky was getting dark at 5 o'clock. So a 7 o'clock show, we could show you the sky sort of in real time, and it would already be dark. So you could actually sit outside and listen to this show and look at the real sky. Well, unfortunately, now that's not possible. We actually have to fast forward to about, let's just see here, probably there's 8 and a few stars start to come out. There's 9 o'clock, and we have a pretty decent view of the sky. Over in the west where the sun went down, the winter constellations are finally disappearing. Orion, right down. You might be able to see him just before he disappears. The belt is really, really low. We've got Gemini, the twins up above. They stick around a little bit longer. They're a bit higher. Mars, our little red planet over here, has finally moved from the constellation of Taurus. He's moved all the way from way down here a few weeks ago, and is now entering into the constellation of Gemini, the twins. So Mars will be sort of still rising a little bit higher as all these constellations sink down into the west. But we are really losing sight of Mars. If we spin around to the south here, our southern constellations have all the spring constellations. Leo the lion up here, the head and mane, the body of Leo the lion, and there's the tail. There's where the moon is tonight, so right sort of on Leo's belly. And actually, if we zoom in, we'll see that we're not quite a full moon here. We're sort of just a little bit past first quarter, so a little bit bigger than a half moon, what we would call a gibbous phase, which is more than half and less than full. So that's where the moon is tonight, over there in Leo. We'll just zoom out again so we can see the proper sky. We talked about the constellation of Boötes, the ice cream cone over here with Arcturus at the bottom. Nice bright star. If we move over towards the east, this is where our new constellations are rising up. We have the bright star Vega, the marker of summer coming. And it really feels like it today with Vega up there. And we have the constellation of Hercules, which we talked about a little bit last week. And Hercules is fighting over here Draco the dragon, which is sort of in that part of the sky as well. Some of these constellations, a little hard to see from inside the city. In fact, most of the time from inside the city, you're looking at mostly just the brighter stars. So some of the fainter ones, like the ones in Draco, the ones in Hercules, are a little bit harder to see. I can find them from my suburban backyard, as long as I stand in a spot where I can't see a street light shining right in my face. I have to sort of move behind the house or whatever. But you have to kind of know where they are. It takes a little bit of practice. But that's the kind of practice you can do every night. And just whenever you get out to the stars, every time they'll be a little bit easier to find. Back over in the north, we still have our Big Dipper way up overhead, nice and bright, nice and high. The two pointer stars in the bowl of the Big Dipper pointing down to the North Star. There's the North Star and the Little Dipper. I can't see any of these Little Dipper stars in my backyard. I can see the two at the end there, but these ones in the middle really, really faint. I don't really worry about the Little Dipper too much. I mean, the North Star, pretty important. It's due north. It stays there in that one spot while everything moves around it. But the rest of the Little Dipper, you're not missing much. So we've got basically the same kinds of constellations that we've been looking at. If we look straight overhead, the constellation that is basically closest to straight overhead is still the Big Dipper, or if you add the extra stars, the Great Bear. Let's see. The Great Long-Tailed Bear. And so if you're downtown or you're looking up through buildings or whatever, that's still your best bet. If you have a pair of binoculars, this star over here in the handle is actually a double star. There's two stars right next to each other. If you have really good vision, you might be able to, let me center here. You might be able to see that there's a bright star, and then just off to one side, there's a fainter star. But if you can't see it with your eyes, binoculars will certainly help. The brighter star is called Mizar, and the fainter star is called Alcor. I'm going to sneeze here. Oh, maybe not. Anyway. Excuse me, sorry. I knew it was coming. I couldn't get away from it. There we go. Mizar and Alcor basically mean the horse and the rider. And the idea is that, the big one's the horse and the smaller one is the rider. It's a good test of your vision. If you can split those two stars and resolve them as two separate points, you probably have pretty close to 20/20 vision. If you've got any of these or you've got astigmatism, I actually use Alcor and Mizar as a test of when it's time to get my glasses prescription renewed. If I can still split them with my glasses, good enough. If I can't, it's time to go into the optometrist and get that checked out. All right. Let's see. We have a couple of questions that have come in. We'll get to those in just a second. Oh yeah, a couple of folks commenting on George. I'm glad we got to see him a little bit. He's been quite camera shy, but that's okay. All right. So one of the things that I like to do on a clear night like this is just get out under the stars and just see what happens. I mean, it's nice to just sit and relax. You can watch the sky. You don't really have to have an agenda or do anything. You can just sort of sit there and relax. Occasionally you'll see a shooting star if you're lucky, whether there's a meteor shower or not. You might see a satellite going by, a moving star that pops into view. You might see northern lights if you're really lucky. But it's nice to just get out there and watch the constellations, and you'll slowly see that as the night goes on, things in the sky will slowly move from point to point. As the sky turns, essentially, the whole sky will move like a wheel around the North Star. And as the night goes on, things will shift positions. It happens so slowly you won't notice it until you look sort of like 15 minutes later or something and you realize that something has moved. But even though you don't consciously notice it, I think you sort of feel it as you're out there under the stars. You can feel the stars slowly moving as the planet that you're on, planet Earth, is rotating. And it's easy to understand why people used to think it was the center of the universe, used to think that it was the most important thing. And of course it is one of the most important things to us. Without the Earth, we wouldn't be here. So it's nice to be able to spend that sort of time out with nature. So if you didn't get a chance to celebrate Earth Day with something green or sustainable today, go out tonight. We've got some clear skies in southern Manitoba. It looks like we can check out the stars, see what you can find up there. Now we have some questions coming in here. Mike, have you got some questions lined up? We'll get to our Q&A section.
Well, it's surprising. Everything's been pretty quiet tonight until George came on the screen, and then all of a sudden it lit up, and then got quiet again until you sneezed, and that apparently was a highlight of the night for many people. Let's tackle. There was a question that KC had on Zoom chat a while back, and it's back when you were showing the picture of the Venera spacecraft on Venus, and they were asking about if, since Venus is so hot, pretty much anything that would land there would melt. Is that true?
But the temperature is about 500 degrees Celsius. So that's twice as hot as your oven can get. That will melt a lot of softer metals. Even the rocks are slightly molten there. So it's certainly not good for electronics or circuit boards or wires or things like that. They basically had to build these Venera landers kind of like a big cannonball to be able to survive. And it's not just the heat, but also the pressure. The atmosphere is crushing it down. So you pretty much have conditions that will fry your spacecraft. I was checking earlier today, the record is 110 minutes. That's the longest that any spacecraft survived on Venus. I thought it was less than an hour, but that was actually one of the earlier ones. They did get one that survived for 110 minutes. For comparison, the Curiosity rover has been operating on Mars since 2012 and is still working today. So the environment's obviously very, very difficult. Now, I think that the heavy spacecraft metals probably wouldn't fully melt. Like the electronics would stop working, that kind of stuff. But there's probably still a spacecraft hulk sitting there on the surface, just waiting for someone to come and collect it and put it in a museum or something like that. So that'd be pretty cool. Okay, what else do we have here?
Well, Lucy was just asking, it's actually a really good question. What is your favorite time to Skywatch?
Oh, that's a great, you know what? This is my favorite time to Skywatch. Springtime, because the mosquitoes haven't come out yet. And it's starting to, it's still cool in the evenings. You get, a reasonably clear kind of sky. It'll be cool, but it's not so cold that you have to be wearing winter boots and you're going to freeze your nose off or things like that. This is a great time to Skywatch. And the spring sky does bring in a whole bunch of telescope objects, galaxies that I really like to observe with my telescope. So I think this is my favorite time, followed by fall for sort of exactly the same reasons. The temperature, the mosquitoes have finally died off. But they all sort of have their features. Winters, you have got these beautiful long nights. You can go observing for 3 hours and still get home in time for dinner, basically, which is really nice. Actually, summer is probably my least favorite time because it doesn't get dark until so late, and it's only dark for a few hours. You really can't get much of the sky in the summer from here in Manitoba. And it's even worse in the farther northern areas where it really doesn't get dark. So yeah, I don't know. I think though the best time to observe is today. If you can observe today, that's my favorite time.
Cool. Okay, switching over to Facebook. Malachi is wondering if you could speak more to the experiment that Perseverance is doing about creating oxygen from Mars's atmosphere.
Yes, that was something that just came out today, actually. And actually, I got an email from Melissa on this as well, and I forgot to mention it. The experiment is there's carbon dioxide on Mars. There's both carbon dioxide in the atmosphere a little bit, and there's frozen carbon dioxide in the form of ice. Well, carbon dioxide is made up of carbon and oxygen. Oxygen is obviously very useful for us. We breathe it, and it's also used as a component of rocket fuel and things like that. So if you can go to a planet and make your own oxygen, you've solved a lot of the problems. So today on Perseverance, they took carbon dioxide, they passed electricity through it to split the atoms out, and they made oxygen. Now they only made a little bit of it, and they just sort of released it because it was just an experiment to make it work. They're not actually collecting the oxygen or anything like that. But it is a perfect example of sort of that first step, that breakthrough moment that 30 years down the road, they'll be able to look at this and say, that was the first time we made breathable oxygen on Mars. And now we use it to fuel this massive colony that we have on Mars. It'll be one of those breakthrough moments. So yeah, very, very exciting.
And a couple of questions that sort of relate to one another. I think on Facebook, somebody was asking about what is Perseverance up to next. That's Hollis on Facebook. And then Lou on Zoom was wondering how many flights are scheduled for Ingenuity.
Oh, great question. So the plan right now is that Perseverance will continue to watch Ingenuity until Ingenuity's batteries are dead. And they figure they have about a 2-week window, maybe a 3-week window from the time that they dropped it off a week ago or so to the time that it just doesn't have the ability to charge up anymore. So that'll be the flight regimen, and as many flights as they can get in there, the better. Each one is going to be a little bit more risky. They're going to go a little farther. They're going to go in different directions and stuff like that. And so any flight might turn out to be the last one, either because the batteries are dead after it, or because, it crashed, or, they tried a maneuver and it didn't work. So we really don't know how many flights, but they'll all happen in the next couple of weeks. Ingenuity will watch that from its position because they basically need it to relay all the images and to sort of observe the drone to make sure that it's all working. After that, it's going to start going up into the highlands. There's this area nearby that is basically an old river delta, and it's going to basically climb up through there and look at all the layered rocks and so on. It's already been collecting rocks and drilling into the rocks and doing various experiments and things like that. It had the oxygen experiment that we just talked about. So there's a whole bunch of things that are planned over the next coming weeks, I guess. But they only plan they have sort of a general plan of what they would do if nothing unexpected happens. As soon as something unexpected happens, like a glitch in the software or a new discovery, all bets are off and they can change things really, really quickly. I remember with what was it? Was it Curiosity maybe that found the meteorite on Mars? And they were supposed to just sort of drive past this area, and they found a meteorite just lying there. And so they basically stopped for a couple of weeks and just spent all their time looking at this meteorite. So that kind of thing can happen as well.
Okay, and I swear we could do a show called Mars Tonight for weeks, and people will still be fascinated with it. We've got Doyle on Facebook wondering how many seas have been found on Mars.
Seas as in oceans seas?
Yeah. They weren't very specific, but it is spelt like seas as in oceans.
Yeah. So we think that in the past, Mars had a global ocean that probably covered half of its surface. And then there would have been lakes and rivers sort of on top of that. But there's sort of a whole big lowland area of Mars that's about half of the planet's surface. And that would have been sort of one continuous ocean with sort of continents, almost like there is here on Earth. Now on Earth, explorers sort of named things the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea, and they basically like to name things, right? There's no real border. Like it's water. It moves back and forth. The currents move all around. So really it's one ocean on Earth, just like it would be on Mars. So because the water isn't there anymore, they basically just named the landforms and the mountains and the continent areas and things like that as if they were land features. But that global ocean definitely would have been there.
All right, well, let's wrap things up with a couple of questions that don't have anything to do with Mars, which I think is great. This one, I don't know, it came in a while ago, so I don't know what slide they were referring to, but Sylvie on Zoom was asking about the names of the two very bright stars on the screen. Why are they so bright? It was near the end, so I should have flagged it right when you were doing it, but that could be it there because there's two very noticeable stars there.
Yeah. This is and we were doing sort of the rotation and things like that. So what we have Oops, I went one too far. So this one over here, that's actually the moon, and it just shows up as a big white blob until you zoom in on it. But these two bright stars over here, these are two of the brighter stars in the sky. This one's Arcturus, which we talked about, sort of that spring star. And then this one on low on the northeastern horizon, that's Vega. And when it's down low, it's not always quite as bright, but as it gets up higher, it gets brighter because it's not shining through all the haze and smog and fog and things like that that are near the horizon through all of that air. And so as it gets up higher, it gets quite a bit brighter. And Vega is one of the brightest stars in the whole sky. So those ones really stand out when even from inside the city, you can easily see those. And there are a couple of other ones way over here. This is Capella. This one's going down in the west right now. This view that we've got here, this is like the whole, looks like the whole planetarium all squished into one map. So it really distorts the view a little bit. But as we zoom in and you sort of have the ground level a little bit more reasonable, there's Vega over there. So that's rising over in the east northeast. And so you can check for that tonight. All right.
Hopefully that answered their question. Can we do one last quick question? It's a pretty good one. I like it. Wanting to know the difference between in when you're observing the sky, a moving satellite and the International Space Station.
Great question. So we talked a little bit about the space station last week because I was hoping that we would be able to see it this week. Unfortunately, they changed the orbit and so the times are all off. But the International Space Station basically looks like a star moving across the sky, but it is brighter than any star in the sky. It is brighter than Vega. It's brighter than Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. It is incredibly bright. In fact, it looks unnaturally bright. People will think it's like an airplane or something like that, except it's silent and it moves very, very straight and then fades out and disappears as it goes into the Earth's shadow. A satellite looks almost exactly the same, except it will be much fainter. It'll be, it's very rare for a regular satellite to be as bright as Vega or one of the brighter stars. Usually they're more like Big Dipper level stars, not super bright, but bright enough that you can see. And they'll also move in a straight line and then they'll often fade out. And so that's pretty much how you tell the difference. There's a great website called heavensabove.com. I think we link to that on the Manitoba Museum's webpage where we have the sky this month. There's a section at the bottom. And if you go to Heavens Above, it will basically give you a predicted list of all the satellites that are going to be visible tonight. And it'll give you a star map for each one to tell you, which constellation it moves through at what time and so on. So if you're really interested in satellites, that's the place to sort of check things out. And Mike has put the link up there. Just make sure when you go there, you click on the location. You have to set it for whatever city you're observing from, because otherwise it won't know where you are. So once you set that, bookmark it, and then you'll know when the space station's coming around. You'll know when satellites are visible. You'll know when those Starlink satellites come over, the ones where there's 60 of them all in a line. And basically keep in mind that there's the space station, and almost everything else you see is either an old rocket booster that is not used anymore, just junk up there, or it's a spy satellite. So wave whenever you see one of those things going by, because they're probably taking your picture. All right.
Scott, just one more question. I almost forgot about this. Quinn on Facebook asking, what is George's favorite constellation?
I assume that George really likes Leo the Lion because he thinks that he's a lion. Certainly he attacked us several times today. He's very good at sort of stalking you around the corner and then leaping upon you. If he was, 500 pounds or something like a lion, I'd probably already be eaten, because he would love to do that. He is a nice cat sometimes, most of the time, almost all the time. But those few times, I definitely see the lion come out in him. So that's probably the favorite.
There you go.
Okay.
Right, that's it for me, Scott.
That's great. Well, thanks, Mike. And thanks, everybody, to everyone who asked questions. If we don't get your questions, you can always drop us an email at space@manitobamuseum.ca, or you can send us a direct message through Facebook or on YouTube. We love to get mail. If you want to send us your observations or questions or pictures or anything like that, we love to see what you're doing out there in the sky. And we love to hear the stories of how the program is helping you get through the time at home and, reconnect with the night sky. Next week, we have finally more planets to talk about than just Mars. I mean, Mars is great, don't get me wrong, but where are all the other ones? Well, we've got 4 more planets that are starting to come into view, and we're going to be talking about them next week. Mercury and Venus in the evening, Jupiter and Saturn in the morning, and we've also got another minor meteor shower, and finally we'll get those International Space Station passes. So we'll talk about those and how you can track down the space station in your own skies. That's it for us today. So thank you very much for joining us here on Dome at Home. And tune in again next week, 7 o'clock Central, and we'll be back with another week of what's up in the sky. Have a great night. Get out there if it's clear. If not, wait for the next clear night and keep looking up.